Hi, Exercise Science. Hope everybody's doing well. I escaped to outside to create this because it's a madhouse inside. So we are starting the digestive system, and we'll also be doing a little piece on nutrition. Um, this would be the unit where we would dissect the fetal pig. So I'm really kind of sad about not being able to do that. Eventually I'm going to post a virtual, fetal pig dissection. It's really not that gross. So if you're somebody who thinks that they can't handle looking at the insides of an animal, it's not that bad. So what are you going to do, right? So today you guys are going to be taking the notes on the first part of the unit, which is really like the structures of the digestive system and what they do. I posted a 5-minute National Geographic video that I want you to watch. It's kind of gross, but it's really interesting because it shows you the passageway of food from the mouth all the way down to the rectum and the anus. So I just wanted to give you guys just a real quick lesson. Sometimes it helps for you to hear me explaining it. I wish I had my anatomy book because I have a nice big diagram of the digestive system, but if you guys are sitting at your computer, what you can do is you can pull up the diagram and you can look at it while I'm explaining this to you. It might be a little bit bright, so I'm going to kind of go over here in the shade so you can see me. 1 second. Okay, there we go. So, there we go. Digestion, it begins in the mouth. This is where mechanical digestion is going to occur. So mechanical, you're actively chewing your food into a bolus, which is just like a big chunk of food. There's also some chemical digestion that happens in the mouth. There are chemicals that are secreted to aid in digestion, and these chemicals are found in your saliva. So the saliva is slightly acidic. There are also enzymes in the saliva that will help break down food. There's actually specifically an enzyme called amylase, which acts on carbohydrates. So carbohydrate digestion will actually start in the mouth. Most people think it happens in the stomach. It does, but it begins in the mouth. And so amylase will actually break the starch that's found in carbohydrates down into glucose. And one thing that's kind of fun to do if you have a cracker that isn't flavored and you just leave it in your mouth without chewing it, you'll actually start to taste a sweetness. So that starchy cracker will begin to taste sweet because the amylase is breaking that starch down into sugar. Some people don't produce a lot of amylase, and so they have some issues with carbohydrate digestion and actually breaking that starch down. I had a friend who went in for a surgery to get some lymph nodes removed because they were causing her issues, and the surgeon actually accidentally removed some of her salivary glands. And the salivary glands are what produce the saliva, and in the saliva is the amylase. Now she obviously is going through a lawsuit with the hospital, but she has issues digesting carbohydrates. So she has to actually eliminate those from her diet. So mechanical and chemical digestion begin in the mouth where the food is being broken down. That food then is going to go into the esophagus. And if you're looking at a diagram, the esophagus, you can actually feel in your throat, that hard structure there, that is the trachea. Right behind the trachea is your esophagus. It's smooth and it's lined with a kind of muscle called smooth muscle, which you guys learned about. And smooth muscle contracts on its own, so you don't have control over these contractions. These waves of contractions are called peristalsis. And they're so strong that you can actually eat upside down, and that food would still go from the back of your throat, which is the pharynx, down the esophagus into your stomach. So these contractions will push that food down the esophagus into the stomach. There's a little flap at the back of your throat called the epiglottis, and that will close when you swallow food to prevent food from going down your trachea. The only thing that should ever go down your trachea here is wind, or air, sorry. This is called your windpipe, is air. If you ever get water or food down there, you will choke. So once that food goes down your esophagus, all the way down into your, I'm sorry, I'm using myself here, your stomach. Your stomach actually sits off to the left side of your body. Everybody just thinks like, oh, I have a bellyache, it's in the middle. It sits off to the left side of the body, and it's a sac. It is a muscle, so it expands and it shrinks. So it expands as it fills with food, and then it will shrink as it's empty. And if you are looking at a picture, or if you watched that video that I posted, when you open up the stomach, there are all these tiny little folds inside of the stomach, and those folds are called the rugae. And what this does is it increases the surface area of the stomach so that more digestion can occur. If you were to open up the stomach, it's like really mucousy, and that mucus is important because it protects the lining of the stomach. There's lots of acid in the stomach, obviously for chemical digestion, but that acid can eat away at the lining of the stomach, and that mucus is there to protect it. Ulcers can happen. Usually it's actually an overgrowth of bacteria that's naturally in the stomach, and the bacteria start to eat away at the lining and can put holes in the stomach, and it can cause pain. So the stomach is actually involved in mechanical digestion because it will turn and churn that food to help break it down, and then obviously chemical digestion where there's enzymes secreted and acids. There's hydrochloric acid in the stomach, which has a pH of like a 2, so super acidic to break down that food. And there are enzymes. There's an enzyme called pepsin that's produced in the stomach, and that can help break down proteins into the smaller parts known as amino acids. There are, you probably saw in the video if you watched this, but if you haven't watched the video, you need to. There are two what are called sphincters. It's a funny word. One that's at the top of the stomach and one that's at the bottom of the stomach. And they're like little passageways. So the sphincter at the top is called the cardiac sphincter because it's closer to your heart. And that will open to allow food through into the stomach from the esophagus. But then it closes. And the reason it closes is because you don't want food to go from the stomach back up into the esophagus. And if it does, you can get a little bit of heartburn because the stomach is acidic. So you've got that acid going back up into the esophagus. And that's not good because it can start to eat away at your esophagus, that soft tissue, and can make its way to your mouth and start to eat away at your teeth. So you can take medication to neutralize that acid. So that sphincter is there to prevent the backflow of food. And then there's a sphincter down at the bottom of the stomach known as the pyloric sphincter, and that will open to allow the digested food from the stomach to go to the small intestine. So your intestines are all in your belly, right? So your stomach's up here, and then you've got the intestines down in the belly. If you're looking at the diagram, you can see they're all coiled up. And that is because we want to increase the surface area. So if you were to so fun with a fetal pig because you can unwind the intestine. It's held together by connective tissue called mesentery. And if you were to unwind the intestine, it could be up to 12 feet. It's crazy. It's called the small intestine because the diameter is smaller than the large intestine, but it's longer than the large intestine. And the big purpose of the small intestine is for a little bit of digestion will happen. So there's some carbohydrate digestion and protein digestion that happens at the beginning of the intestine. But it's there because that is where nutrients are absorbed from your food. So the intestine is all lined with blood vessels, and these blood vessels are just waiting to absorb through diffusion all those nutrients, all those good nutrients like glucose and amino acids that are going to go through the bloodstream either to build muscle or to provide energy for the body. So